Hello. Ooh, woke everybody up there for a second. Excellent. Can everybody hear me in the back? I've been noticing some of the panels are like, "Hi, I'm liking to talk to you," and I can't, and no one can hear anybody. Especially with the back when it's open, and then you get like everybody doing the Colossus roar in the back, and it's hard. So, by the way, if you feel like it, you can come a little forward. My feelings will not be hurt if you have to get up and leave. I understand. It'll be fine, but I just want to make sure everybody hears everything. Hey, it's 8:30. So, my name is Dr. Jonathan Cresci, and I am you're at a panel called Making Loud Things Soft. We're going to learn how to use compressors today, and thank you for the very small section of people who care about compression. But I feel like it's not like a generalized subject. People don't want to know about this stuff, but I'm glad that you are here because I get this question a million, bajillion, zillion times, and it's really, people on the internet make it a lot harder than it is. So, I own a business, it's called Fundamental Sounds. I give this spiel a lot, but I'm also the an assistant professor of sound recording technology at Texas A&M University, Kingsville. I just started in August, so there you go. So I went from teaching in Maryland to teaching in Texas, so that's where I am now. I am in South Texas. And basically, you can get in touch with me through any of those means. I think that's a Twitter link. I know no one likes Twitter anymore, or whatever it's called, so that's cool. I actually made like one of those other ones. What is it? Like the sky blue, blue sky thing. It's up there, and it's under Fun Sounds, so you should be able to find me that way. I didn't have time to change the slide. I'm lying, I fell asleep. And so I took a nap. I'm getting old. It was a lot today. It was a lot. Okay, the Fundamental Sounds at 1867 is a YouTube channel. Hopefully there'll be stuff there. Website is getting redone, but it does work, but it looks kind of bad, but it's going to be awesome. And then the best way, because I'm old, is email, and I will always return your email, right? Just let me know that you're from MAGFest. Be specific about your question. Like if you want me to like answer something about a mix you did, make sure you send your mix, because I'll email back and then I won't hear back from anybody. So definitely talk to me. I'm a teacher at heart, that's why I'm here. And so I want to share everything that I possibly can with you. So today is about compression. So I'll ask the people, what does a compressor do? Okay, good. Compresses stuff. Yes, so let's try not to use the word in the definition. Yes? Turns things down. Okay, that's really close. It makes loud things soft. That's all a compressor does. Okay, so when everybody says like, oh my God, it adds so much tone to my bass, it doesn't. Okay, what it's doing is it's making the loud bit of your bass that you don't like softer, to let the tone shine through, right? It makes loud things soft. So then it begets the question, why do we use them? And it's the same answer, because they make loud things soft, okay? And it's a little unintuitive, because what happens is we do this specifically to be able to make things more consistent. So a lot of those panels where you couldn't hear people, okay, I just came from one. I'm sure it was brilliant, but I couldn't hear like half of what was being said. And they mentioned a book, and I was like, oh my God, if I could only have known what that book was. But what you could do is you could use a compressor, and I'll actually show you how to do that, where no matter where you are on the microphone, your voice will stay the same. Okay, we use it a lot in broadcast or in podcasting. You compress the main microphone so the movement doesn't change the dynamics. Okay, because that's hugely important. I also have an example of a band that we recorded in class in Texas, and we have a drum set just to demonstrate what you can do with the drum set. So I have some demonstration pieces once we talk about the nitty-gritty stuff. Okay? That's why I don't tell anybody I disconnected a bunch of stuff and put it back together. Just remind me when I'm done to put it back, otherwise people are going to be mad. Okay, so a compressor, okay, acts in the amplitude domain. So compressors let me be more specific. The normal compressor, okay, a compressor that is just a compressor, because there are things like dynamic EQs and multi-band compressors and all this other stuff that have a little bit more stuff going on, and we can talk about it. By the way, if you have any questions at any time, raise your hand. I will answer them, because I want to make sure you get enough questions in too. So, but let's think about it in the amplitude domain. So it means how loud something is. That is the amplitude domain. An equalizer acts on the frequency domain, so it has to do with your pitches that you're working with or your frequencies. Reverb acts in the time domain, right? So that, because like depending on where something is, you'll hear it at a different time. So you have your three domains, amplitude, frequency, and time, that we can alter as recording engineers to trick people into thinking things that didn't happen really or whatever, right? Because that's what we do, we trick people. Like I won't tell you that drum sound that I was playing, it wasn't like that when I first got it. Like my class had to cut the whole thing up and make it in time. It was quite a fun thing. So real quick, decibels, okay? I just want to review decibels. You may know this, you may not know it. dBu, this is analog decibels. This is stuff on your tape machine. This has to do with voltage, because if you went to my talk last night, what comes out of this microphone is electricity, and that electricity has a voltage, and that is what decibels were originally apart, because you were imparting that voltage onto tape, okay? But nowadays, we live in the digital world, okay? That's Reaper, by the way. Digital world, we have dBFS. That stands for decibel full scale. The reference to that decibel is the maximum power of your system. So 0 dBu is perfectly fine. 0 dBu is pleasant. 0 dBFS is digital noise, right? That we try to avoid at all costs unless we're doing it on purpose, which is fine. You clip your kick drums, fine, don't care, okay? But that's a thing, it's a joke. For anybody who knows me. It's like my first student that I taught was like, do you clip your kick drums? And I'm like, I don't know. Should I? No, maybe, depends. So, but that 0 dBFS will cause distortion. So we want to stay away from it, okay? Because there are certain compressors, i.e. they're called limiters, that we use in the mastering phase of things to prevent ourselves from getting to 0. Because nowadays, in the modern era, I don't want to get too far off field, but this has to do with limiting. In the modern era, you can't even get close to 0, because when you convert files from WAV files, like on a CD or 24-bit or whatever, if you convert that to an MP4 or an MP3, you get a small bump in decibel. It's called a true peak. And so if you're mastering at 0 or at -1, when someone listens to it on Spotify, it will clip and digitally distort. So that's why if you go on the websites, they'll all say -2. -2 is the safe land. You can always prevent stuff. So decibels are important because they define the amplitude domain. The next thing that we have to look at in the amplitude domain, this is part of the Fundamentals of Sound series here. Envelope. Those of you who do a lot of MIDI stuff, right? You're going to know envelopes. They're the ADSR curve. Okay? Attack, decay, sustain, release. Every instrument, every voice, everything has an envelope. I'm a professional, or I guess I was a professional trumpet player. I haven't played trumpet in like 3 years, so technically I'm no longer a professional, but I was a professional trumpet player. And when you try to teach somebody how to do a staccato or how to do a legato, what you're doing is you're trying to get them to make changes in the envelope of their instrument. And if the envelope has to do with amplitude, what can we use to change the articulation of an instrument? A compressor, exactly, because we can make loud things soft, right? So that attack, we can say, hey, you know, I don't want that attack. I want to get rid of that attack. I can make my compressor shave the attack off, and now I have more tone. I'm less punchy, whatever punchy means, okay? Or when you start getting into like the trickiness of the different controls of a compressor, you could tell the compressor to to be triggered by that attack, but then you delay the compressor from actually doing anything until it gets to the sustain. And then it compresses the sustain, releases it, and now you've just made everything more punchy because I guess, I don't know what punchy means. It's one of those musical metaphors that means something different to everybody, but you're going to get more attack because you're removing some of the release. This is what compressors do. Okay? So, let's talk a little bit about the technique. If I'm moving too fast, please ask questions. I just want to make sure there's plenty of time to do stuff. The threshold of a compressor, and we'll look at these. The threshold of a compressor tells the compressor when to compress. I know that sounds silly, but that's what it is. You basically are setting the level. I want you, compressor, to start compressing at -6 decibels. So as soon as your music hits -6 decibels, the compressor will trigger. Okay? If all other controls are off, that will happen. Okay? Then you have the ratio. The ratio tells the compressor how much to compress. Now this is a little bit of mathiness, okay? So a 2-to-1 ratio, okay? Here we go. Let's see if we can all get this. A 2-to-1 ratio means that once the signal crosses the threshold, it will have to get 2 decibels louder in the input for the output of the compressor to go up 1 decibel. See how we made the loud thing softer? Let me say that again. So as the audio crosses the threshold, here's the threshold, it will do this. It'll no longer get loud at the same rate because it will now take 2 decibels for the output to go up to 1. To better illustrate that, a 20-to-1 ratio, i.e. a limiter, basically, will not allow it to ever get above the threshold. Ever. Usually it's marked infinity to 1, but I just wanted to be like 20-to-1. Okay, yes? The question was, can you think of a ratio as a reverse fraction? My answer is I'm not good enough at math to know whether that's true or not.
Technically, a ratio is a fraction.
Okay, so we've now got a thing that technically a ratio is a fraction. So,
The same thing written differently.
okay, then I'm saying yes. Let's do it. Okay?
Because that to me always made it seem a little easier.
Okay, cool. Yes, in the back. Okay, say it one more time. By like if it's 4-to-1, it's multiplied by 1/4. Okay, so there it is. It is a quarter. So go. Very good. Okay, so see, we all talk about it in a different way, but we get it. We're basically doing the same thing. We're making the audio softer on the output. Remember, this is a device, right? Even if it's a plug-in, you have to imagine it as a thing that has an input and an output. And we are altering the input so the output is different, okay? So we have to think of inputs and outputs. The attack of a compressor tells the compressor once it's crossed the threshold, when do you want it to start? So for instance, maybe the attack is 0, meaning as soon as it goes over the threshold, it immediately starts, okay? Then you might want to actually change the attack so that now it's going to take a certain amount of milliseconds once it crosses the threshold to make it to work. So if we go back here, think of it, of course I don't have a mouse pointer. So like if you look at that where the attack has a certain amount of time, right? So you can tell the compressor, hey, I don't want to destroy the attack of this. I want to alter something else in the articulation, so I will start the compressor later. I'll wait for the attack to trigger the compressor, but it won't immediately start. We'll give it like 5 milliseconds or 10 milliseconds or 11 milliseconds, and that will change at what point in this envelope that the compressor actually acts. Question? Yes, go ahead. Yes, absolutely. So, for instance, let's say you want to make your snare drums have more impact and less tone. Okay? What you're going to do is you're going to have the snare drum get triggered, right, at a certain level, and then you're going to move the attack so that initial hit doesn't go away, like it doesn't dull at all. Okay? Also with vocals. Vocals are a big thing. If you are missing a lot of articulation, your compressor, if you're using a compressor, could be taking some of that off, right? It could be shaving the top of your articulations. So you delay it, you add to the attack, right? You give it more milliseconds. So you delay that attack. So yeah, you're still compressing everything, but you're giving that split second, that 5 milliseconds, that 10 milliseconds of attack to stay there. Okay? We go back. Release. The release tells the compressor at what point after you've gone below the threshold do we let go of the compression. Okay, when will it stop? This is very important because when we compress things, in general, unless you're trying to do something that is like sound design like, or if you're trying to like make an effect, we're trying to make compression as invisible as possible. People hate when they hear compression. Okay? It makes you a little seasick, right? It's like, and it's unnatural because things that your brain says should be loud are all of a sudden softer than the softer things. And that's because the release is all wonky, right? So we use the release to smooth out the transition between compression and non-compression so that we can sort of get this even feel to it. Very important in voiceover work, very important in vocals, super important in if you're doing any mastering. Like if you do mastering and you're trying to create sort of like, okay, here's the thing, right? Compressors make loud things soft. And when you master something or when you mix something finally, right? Usually when something is badly mixed, it's because we notice something that we shouldn't notice. So like you're listening to the music and it sounds great, and then all of a sudden it's like a hi-hat jumps out at you, or that trumpet solo is just a little too loud, okay? And what we do is we'll instinctively make that thing softer. But if we make that softer, then all of those parts that it wasn't too loud are now too soft. And this is where that bus compressor, or the compressor that compresses the whole thing, comes in. Because what it does is it takes all of those little spikes of attention-grabbing things and makes them just a little softer. And they go away, and that's what we call glue, right? If I can use industry standard terms, I guess, right? Like, that's the glue part of it. We're gluing things together because we're taking all of those random spikes that show up and we're making them softer so they go away, so we're not distracted by them, okay? When I give mastering panels, everybody asks me, how do you know when it's done? You know when it's done when it's fine. Like when you've listened to it and you didn't go, that doesn't sound good. Like if you can listen to it and go, all right, then it's done. You just stop and move on, okay? Because you could sit there and nitpick forever. But release helps you with that. The slower the release, the more gentle stuff is, right? You could, though, if you were trying to make an effect, you could speed the release up to the fact that it was like immediate, and then all of a sudden you get this like sound, like you can actually hear the compressor compress, and that might be cool. If anybody's ever, if anybody has ever used, listened to like EDM music from back in like, I don't know, 2004 or whatever, maybe, I don't know. And like, in order to make the track bounce, they would key a compressor to the kick drum, meaning the compressor is looking at the kick drum. It's listening to the kick drum. And then they'd put that compressor that is only listening to the kick drum on the whole mix. And then every time that kick drum hits, it will the mix. And then you got this boom, 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 and it would do this. Nowadays, we key it to an LFO, so it's a low frequency emitter, like a low sine wave, and that's what they do it to. But back in the beginning, you did kick drums. Yes? Oh, so the question is doing that, how is that different than a side chain? It isn't. That is side chaining. It's the same thing, right? But what that is so what we're doing is we're using the compressor to create an effect. And what it's basically trying to do is it's trying to make the music actually bounce. So then when you're bouncing with the kick drum, you're like, yeah, okay, I get it, because the whole music is. Now, if you overdo it, then someone like me who's super sensitive to it will be like, oh my God, I'm going to go throw up, because it moves in my head funny, okay? So that's what compressors do. So compressors make loud things soft, and it's up to you to know what you want to make soft. This is where the creativity comes in with compression. I didn't make a slide about this, but let me briefly talk about side chains, okay? Most compressors, pardon me, most modern compressors have what are called side chains. So a compressor let's think of this abstractly. Compressors listen to your music, okay? They listen to the input, and then they act on that input. Most compressors will have the ability to change what it's listening to. Now we're not listening to the input anymore. We're listening to something completely different. For instance, if you want to make your bass not sound like crap when you compress it, okay? What you do is you have it listen to the bass, but you have it listen to a frequency limited bass. And that's because compressors don't like lots of energy, right? Because they're amplitude based. So if something is louder or has more energy, it will make it work harder. Well, bass sounds, the frequency, are inherently louder than higher frequencies just due to the wavelength. So when you feed it a bass and it plays a low note, the compressor is going to be like, right? Even though you're not really hearing it, but the compressor is. So in the side chain, you just say, okay, don't listen to the low stuff. Just listen to the middle. Just listen to the pluck, right? The doot of the fingers. Listen to that. And then it's like, oh, okay. And it lets all of that other stuff go through without messing with it, and it makes it more natural sounding, okay? Now, some people would call that a trick, but however, I'll let you into a secret. It's just how you do it, okay? It's not a trick. It is just the way. It has always been the way. As much as I would love to make a video that you will all click on because it's the trick, it's just the way, okay? So there you go. But that's what a side chain does. Side chains allow you to have the compressor act on one signal while being triggered by another. So it listens to this other one and applies all of the stuff that you told it to do based on that signal, but it's actually affecting a separate one. And that's how you get things to bounce more, or maybe it's how you make your basses better, or any number of creative things that you can do with a side chain. It's easier now because of the digital world. Everything now has a side chain, but in the old days, not everything had an extra input. And so you really weren't able to do a lot of that stuff because you didn't have the ways to route the signal in the analog domain. Yes? As far as I know, that's where it comes from, side chaining. It's an audio term. I have no idea. It was asked if there's an etymology to side chaining. I just know that that's what it was called when I was in school. Yes, all the way in the back, and then I'll get you. Okay, so the question is are there any low-cost compressors that have this side chain? I would think most modern analog stuff probably does. I don't operate in the analog domain very much, so I don't know any specific brands. But I think I think now it's kind of like a requirement. The issue you're going to run into is, do you have enough outputs on your gear to get it into the analog domain to route something to it? That's really where you come in. But every digital one has it, like everything in every DAW, every compressor that comes with the DAW will have a sidechain. Question?
Yes, you mentioned, I guess in a practical sense, like frequency limiting and bass. Is that like a separate plugin that you would use kind of or alongside the compressor in the DAWs?
Okay, so the question is, with the frequency stuff where you're band passing your key, is that built into the compressor or you do it with EQs? Most compressors have it built in, where you just click some stuff and move it and it's fine in the digital world. However, if yours doesn't, all you have to do when you set it up is throw an EQ before what you're sending to it, and it'll be fine. So like, for instance, when I'm putting reverb on something, sorry to move afield from compressors for a second, when I put reverb on something in a pop mix, right? Pop mixes don't go well with having a lot of low end, like in reverbs and stuff. It just makes it muddy and hard to listen to. So I actually put an EQ before the send, or in the send. So basically the music is feeding this EQ that is band passed, and then the reverb is only seeing the band passed music, and then I'm adding back band passed reverb into the thing. So I'm actually preventing like my basses and all of that stuff from muddying up reverb. So yes, you can just put it in front of the compressor and it'll be fine. All right, so that's side chaining. Now let's look at, okay, question, yes. Oh, the bass thing or the kick drum thing? Yeah, so let's say so gates are also compressors. Okay, so for instance, your types of compressors are compressors, gates, limiters. There's actually a reverse compressor called an expander that makes everything soft loud. But what a gate is it's like a door. So sound comes out, and if it's above the threshold, it stays open. If it goes below the threshold, the compressor infinitely compresses it. Sorry, I didn't mean to make a bang there. Right? So it shuts the door. So if you've ever wondered how, like, I don't know, okay, I'm just going to say this. I don't know if it's true or not, right? This is probably 75% true. Odds are with, like, Metallica and, like, Battery or Master of Puppets, there's no way they were that tight. No way. Okay? I mean, they're good. They were definitely good, but this was in analog era. There was no shifting of things, right? So in order to make them tighter, I guarantee you somebody was gated. Which meant, like, let's say the drums were your key to the gate. So every time Lars smacked a drum, the gate would open. And then every time he stopped, the gate shut. And that meant all of the rhythm guitars that were going, that stuff, right? They would shut off every time. So so they could hold over a little bit and it wouldn't matter because basically they were shut off in the mix. So that would be another thing. You're using a side chain to tell the gate when to work, but you're gating something else. Right? Another thing you could do using side chains is a side chain. You'd have the side chain on a vocal, like let's say an overdubbed vocal, and you had a music track underneath it. So like for instance, like on a radio, right? You got the jingle in the beginning, da, 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 and then the guy comes on and the thing gets softer. Well, you could hire someone to pull the fader down, or you could key a compressor to his vocal, and as soon as he starts talking, it lowers the thing. Those are called duckers, because it ducks the music, and then it would just roll off and be done. So there's a lot of different uses for side chains, but it's all about controlling amplitude. So here are two very general uses of compressors, okay? The first is called the insert effect. So as you can see, you've got sound coming from a track, okay? It's going into a channel of your mixer. It enters the compressor, gets compressed, leaves the compressor. That is called an insert effect. I know it sounds like so obvious, but let's just go with me on this one, okay? It's an insert effect. And this allows you to directly affect the sound. But there are other clever things that we can do with compressors, okay? For instance, we can use something called, well, let me do this once. I would be using this as more of a corrective compression. So I think of effects in two realms. You have corrective effects, right? Fixing things you screwed up as a recording engineer, and then non-corrective effects, things that make things prettier or uglier or whatever. The effect effects, whatever you want to call that, right? So the fancy stuff. So for instance, when I'm doing vocal stuff, I might be using a compressor because let's say my vocalist is doing this and then it gets softer and louder and softer and louder and louder and softer and it's really like, oh my God, I can throw a compressor on that and make it all even. And then I could use an EQ to correct proximity effect. There's all sorts of stuff that I can do to make things sound more real, more natural. And then after that, I can do things that can make it sound unnatural or better or shiny or whatever. So I use insert effects a lot of times for the idea of corrective effects. Things that, because you're basically affecting something forever. It will never be the same once it goes through the compressor. Is that clear? Okay. So then we can get creative in something called a parallel effect. Parallel effects are when you take the sound from your track and you feed it straight out. And then you take a piece of that, you take a part of it, and then you affect that part, and then you add it back in. This is, by the way, how reverb works. If you ever want reverb to be natural sounding, it must be a parallel effect. Do not use the mix thing on your thing. It won't sound right, okay? Because what this does is it allows you to blend things. This is sort of the key of what a lot of people call parallel compression or New York drum compression or what crush buses, things like that. What they do is they take the thing that they want to make, let's say, thicker and more fat, more like impactful, right? They take the normal stuff and they just send it out. And then they take it and they compress the snot out of it and they make it ugly and where it's only emphasizing the things they want to be emphasized. And then they blend that back into the original signal and it doesn't affect the signal up here. Like all of the hits are still there. Like this is not softer. But you add this in and now all of a sudden you're adding from the bottom. Like maybe you're adding more room tone or maybe you're adding more attacks. I'll also say this. Any of you out there classical musicians and or recording engineers? Okay, a couple of you. One of the things that everybody says in the classical world is, because I'm a classical engineer, is that you don't compress classical music. It's never compressed because dynamic range is king and all of that. They always compress classical music. Okay? Now, the thing is they don't do it in the same way that we would. They don't make loud things soft. They make the soft stuff louder, right? So what they do is they parallel compress it. They take all the junk at the bottom that's softer and they make that louder and they add it in. So what instead of making the tops softer, they go this way, they're actually making the bottoms louder. Okay? And that's just another form of parallel compression. Yes? Okay, cool. So the question is how would I do this in my DAW? And it's through an auxiliary bus. So your parallel effects will go through the auxiliary bus. You could do it a bunch of different ways, but that's the way I would do it. And I'll show you how I'm going to do it because I've got a thing up. Any other questions about this concept? Yes.
Really crazy question.
Absolutely.
Can you subtract instead of sum?
Yes.
Is that ever
Okay, so the question is can you subtract instead of sum? Okay, so you won't necessarily be able to, well, yes, you can. So the way you do it, and I did this once, and it does actually work, is the compressed signal, you reverse its phase. Okay, so if for those of you, this is kind of a little out of the scope, but here we go. Phase is time. Okay, so your sine wave is like this, that's in phase, and then if you take the sine wave and flip it around, so the positive is now negative and the negative is positive, and you add it together, theoretically, you should get nothing. It's how your headphones work, right? Your noise canceling headphones. Well, you could basically reverse the phase of this auxiliary bus and feed it in, and it would subtract instead of add. Yes. The way I did it was I recorded a string quartet, and the lead violinist was too loud, and so I took her spot mic and I reversed the phase, and instead of when I pushed it up, it made her louder, it actually made her softer. And it worked. It was pretty cool, right? So that is something that you can do. And I'm sure there's a plugin out there that probably already does it, but that would be how it did it. It would be using phase. Okay, let's go over some types. Because like everything, there are different kinds. And I will reiterate my point from last night, which is plugins are the worst investment unless you absolutely need them. Okay? Because someone did come up and say, well, what about using Serum? And I'm like, okay, like if you need it to make your music, then okay. But I'm just saying, like, just don't buy them because, like, I'll show you. I have like 2,000 plugins on this machine, and I use 7 of them. And I regret every moment of buying all of the other ones. Okay, so we're going to look in the digital realm, but you have to remember that digital plugins are actually representations of analog plugins. Not just the ones from like UAD or whatever, but like they were always copies, right? None of them were really new. So we derive a lot of their nuances from the analog type. So the very first one that you're going to see is called an optical compressor. Optical compressors they're based off of photodiodes, and they tend to have fixed everything. I actually wrote that. Look at that. Okay. So they have fixed everything. That means the attack time, the release time, the threshold, it's all fixed. The ratio, all fixed. You don't get to touch any of it. All you get to do is turn up the gain. So it has an input knob and an output knob. And you just go, input, and then you can turn the output down. And that's what you're doing. You're doing this to try to get what you're looking for. They work really well for things like vocals because they have a really like interesting attack and release ratio that I don't know what it is, but it like always sounds really natural. Okay, they actually were used in the old days. They were called program compressors. They were in radio stations, so they were there to lower the loudness of entire program material, like entire songs, as opposed to being something very precise. So opticals are one. For instance, one that we might look at is the LA2A by Teltronics. It's an old version of it. It's sort of the epitome of that style. Then you have what is called the Very Mu, which is all the mastering engineers like to use this stuff. Basically, it's the same thing as the optical compressor, but it uses tubes instead. So basically, you feed more energy into a tube. The tube basically automatically compresses it because that's what tubes do. Okay, I'm not an electrical engineer, so I can't tell you why all that happens. Just trust me, that's what happens. But again, they also have a lot of the same, most of the controls are available, but not all of them. Then you get FET compressors. FET compressors are the ones that we think of, at least if you're a rock and roll musician, those are the compressors you think of. They're like the 1176 compressor and stuff like that. They are very aggressive sounding. You cannot control the threshold, but you can control the attack and the release time and the ratio. And they're super aggressive and they're relatively modern, meaning they don't have a sound to them because they're not feeding audio through a tube or something like that. It's much cleaner. So we tend to use those on things like drums and bass because you have more control over it. and it makes it a little easier to work with. And then finally, you have the super modern one, which is called a VCA compressor. VCA stands for voltage controlled amplifier. So think of it as you're using chips, right? Like little chips to do the compression. They're little amplifiers, okay? And by the way, if you want to know, a FET stands for field effect transistor. So you're using transistors to do it. And then in this one, you're using amplifiers on a chip, okay? If you get into the weeds, you'll hear stuff about THAT chips, T-H-A-T chips. Those are the ones that a lot of these use. They are super modern, super clean, fast, have tons of control, and they're very precise. So these are the things that you use to do like super surgical stuff, okay? So a lot of mastering engineers have VCA compressors on their chains. Okay, so I'll come back to this. Let's go to actually looking at something. All right, so, hold on. Now you can hear me. Okay, so this is Pro Tools. It doesn't matter, you can do this in anything. I just put it in Pro Tools just to make people angry. And being ironic because I'm giving a Reaper one later on this week. So this is Pro Tools. This is your track. This is your mixer. Do you care what I'm in? Do you want to see it in the mixer? Do you want to see it on the editor? Does it matter? Okay. Basically, in Pro Tools, they show the same stuff. So here are your inserts. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how you could use a compressor sort of live, because there are some benefits. Like if you're a vocalist or if you're doing podcasting, a lot of times if you can get your stuff set up, there's no reason why you should ever use plugins. Like you could use a hardware compressor before you get to your DAW and just record it. It's fine. But let's listen to this. So I'm telling you, I got like a whole lot of plugins here. Let's go to, all right, I promised you to look at an LA2A. So, sure. Hey, look, it's there. Sorry it's hard to see. Let me see, did I leave this on? Oh, I did. I'm so smart. Okay, this is an LA2A. This is an optical compressor. Notice there are two knobs. You have the, hey, this is the input knob, and here's the reduction knob. So if I do this, you won't be, oh, you still hear me. That's a little weird. Okay. Ooh, that's going to be fun. Oh, it's reduction, sorry. Now you can't hear me at all because I've done that and it's gone. Exactly. But now you can see I can tailor my peak reduction here so that it's always happening or it's maybe not. But it's taking just the edge off of things. Now, what you could do if you have pre-recorded material, right? Like right now I'm talking, right? If you have pre-recorded stuff, you can actually increase the gain and push into the compressor. So let's say I want let's say I do this. So this is pretty aggressive. And then I can start pushing into it. So now I have that volume, but it has a lot of compression. Okay? Now, what we can do is notice that when I move from side to side now, it doesn't get softer, does it? See, now now I look stupid because I'm just going back and forth like this. But like if you're doing a podcast and you got people who are animated and they're moving around and doing stuff, you've now prevented them from messing up your audio, right? Now you could do this later because we could record it, edit it, and then do it later. But if you were on radio, you don't get to do it later, right? You got to do it right then. So you would have the compressor doing this. And you would just set it. And what's nice about the optical compressor is that it's only two knobs. So you decide how much peak reduction you want, and then you adjust the gain. Or you could adjust the gain and then adjust your peak reduction. It doesn't really matter. So that's a little, do you see that? It's pretty cool how you can do this, and this then makes it easier. Like, for instance, in MAGFest, we could, like, if they had a really great budget and they had stacks of compressors for all of this, they could set it up so everybody's talking and no one, like, it doesn't matter if they're this far away because it still sounds great, right? But if I turn that off, if I bypass this, now all of a sudden it's a lot softer, isn't it? And I have to be this close, but I turn it back on, and now I'm actually pretty okay leaning back in my awesome chair. Yes, sir.
Does it ever make sense to, like, before you start recording a guitar, to like add a compressor and kind of mess with it before you record your input guitar signal, or is it for guitars is it more like a thing after?
Oh, so the question is, does it ever make sense to mess with compressors before you record a guitar? The answer is it's up to you. Like, it's just like when you record vocals or record anything, right? You can do stuff before you record it. Just remember that you can't go back, right? But if you can get a sound that you want, then yeah, go ahead and do it. There are a lot of voice producers who have like their sound that they always have, and they've got like these little lunch boxes, they're 500 series stuff, and they just plug the mic into it, and then everybody goes through it, and they record that. And that actually speeds up production a lot, because then when you go to mixing, you're like, oh, well, this is what it is. We already did it, right? And you don't have to make that choice. So it does make sense, depending on how fast you want to do it. Yes, sir.
I was just going to say, for guitars specifically, if you have drive or something, compressor before it significantly affects any of that. So, like, depending on the effects you have require an hour.
Okay, so what was said from the audience from that question is that compression affects drive. So if you're a guitarist and use a lot of drive, using compression will affect that sound. So just remember that when you're using an effect, before you record it, you are trying to get the thing that you're getting, right? Whereas if you record something clean like a vocal, you're trying to think about that stuff later. Question?
If you have your key production set to some number, what is stopping you from setting your gain to max if you're going to force it to not exceed a particular decibel level?
Oh, okay. So the question is what is going to prevent me from turning this all the way up if I'm going to gain reduce it all the way?
Or to some number.
Right, nothing.
So is there any like change in sound quality of just setting the gain just to some arbitrary value versus max? You know that post limited.
Right. Okay. So is there the question is will it change the sound if you do that? The answer is yes, because all plugins, even though they're digital, are based off of an analog thing, okay? Which means it expects a particular amplitude of signal. So if you and it's usually around 0 dBu, which in general in digital world is like negative 12 dBFS. If you start pushing harder into that compressor in the digital realm, you will distort the compressor. Right? I don't know what'll happen. Let's find out. Okay. Hey, look at that. That's interesting. Oh, it's bypassed. All right. Hopefully I won't break anything. Don't break anything. Okay, it was going to break something. Okay. So the answer is you will do something to it and it will change. But the other thing is, though, I don't want everybody to feel like that, because that was not a stupid question, right? Because once you learn the basics of compression and you understand what it does, then you can go back and you can do stuff like that, and you might find a sound that you're looking for, right? A lot of times when we hear sounds that have been recorded, it's because think about the guitar. I don't know if this is true either, but I'm imagining in my head, being a recording engineer, that the reason why SM57s are the way we record guitars is because at some point a famous musician walked into a studio and that was the only mic they had. But because they were famous, maybe it was Jimi Hendrix, maybe it was somebody, everybody heard that and was like, damn, that's a great sound. I want that. What did they use? And now everybody just does it. It's like literally the de facto thing. If you want to record a guitar, you put that SM57 up there. There are other things. I'm not saying it's the only thing, but like that is like almost de facto in every studio that I go to. They'll even have an amp with it already set up, right? So you want to experiment with this thing. So it's a very good question. So let's look at a different one. So this was optical, okay? And by the way, the reason I'm using these UAD ones is because they're old. They represent older things, so you can actually see what this stuff is. So this is an 1176. Okay, so this is your FET compressor. Again, it has an input knob and output knob, but notice now it has the attack and the release. So I can actually change what this sounds like. It also has a ratio. So for instance, I might move the attack this way, the release, and then that, let's see. And then what I can do is I can push the input gain like this. And so now, notice how the meter moves a ton faster. And it's because it is acting quicker than the optical did. You probably also can notice that my articulation is a lot more precise. I'm not actually talking any different. Here, let me get the other compressor up. So here is, ooh. Okay. So here is my optical compressor that I had before, right? So you'll notice that you're missing some stuff. If I bypass this, now you can tell that things are much more articulate with my sound. And that is due to the technology in the compressor. And this is why we use this a lot for things like drums. Yes? So vocal de-essers, so the question is this how a vocal de-esser works? Actually, yes. So a vocal de-esser is a compressor that is keyed to only the frequency band that makes S's. So for instance, let's leave this up. Let's be silly. We'll grab a de-esser. Let's see, where's my de-esser? Hello, de-esser. There you are. So here's my de-esser. This is a compressor. In fact, this is what it's hearing. This is what it's hard to hear it. So what it's doing is it's actually listening to the de-essing, and I can adjust the range. Like I can go, okay, well, like my S's are sort of here-ish. There we go, and now I'll have a little bit less S's. SSS, SSS. I don't know, it's not great, but it's hard to hear. But yes, basically it's a compressor for high frequency content. By the way, if you have a lot of sibilants, don't EQ it. Use a de-esser, because the EQ, it's just don't do it. You won't be able to do it. You won't be able to make it work with an EQ. You have to use a de-esser because it's dynamic, right? It only happens when the S happens. If you use an EQ, it happens all the time, which means everything sounds less SE, okay? So yes, that is true. Now, I've got probably close to 5 minutes, so let's real quick, I wanna show you that parallel drum effect. So we'll save the session, sure, why not? Close the session. Going through the, oh, here we go. Okay, I'm back. Oh, I used the wrong one. Damn it. Okay, I'm back. So this is parallel compression. So here's my drum track, okay? Drums, right? Here's my send. I'm sending the drums. Where's the send? Here's the send. Okay, here's my send. It's muted right now, but I'm sending all of it. I'm going to go down here to my aforementioned crush bus, and I'm going to put a drum thing in, and we'll do silly stuff with it. So we'll grab a this, and we'll go like this. Okay, that's called all buttons in. And then I'm just going to do maybe that and that. Oops. Okay, so now when I play it, when you listen to it, it's going to sound weird. Okay? But first, we should probably find out how loud this is. Okay, now I'm going to, this is all going to be engaged. Without, with. Okay. All right, hold on a sec. Let's do this. That. Hopefully it won't be too loud. Okay. So now you can see how the needle is moving more. Now it's hard to hear because I don't have the setup to be able to change it. But notice down here how low the signal is. And that's because I'm compressing it. But notice the things that are probably happening. What's the difference? This isn't good, by the way. I'm just trying to demonstrate a point. Right. And you get like occasionally a snare that just goes whap, right? And that's kind of the things that you can do. If you wanted to do that, you could do that. But what most people would be doing is they would be you hear much more tone. Yeah, it is louder too. So louder is always better, so that there is some of that. But you're adding more tone of the drums because that is what's actually being compressed. That's what's being revealed by the compression, and I'm adding it in to the drum set. Now, these are all musical ways of looking at things, okay? But you can also do it with vocals, right? You can do it with spoken word. And what you can do if someone doesn't have enough articulation, you could actually use parallel compression to make their articulation stand out more. So there are definite uses for parallel compression. Yes? Okay.
And so I was wondering, completely unrelated, you mentioned that there's 1,000 plugins that you may have downloaded.
Yes.
And some that you use regularly.
Yes.
Any of those related to compression expansion?
You want okay. So, I don't get paid for this stuff, so I don't know if I should be giving people like free advertising. I tend to use the FabFilter plugins a lot. They're my favorite. Honestly, the reason I started using them was because I really, really wanted to try to do iPad music production. And back in the old days, they were the only plugins that were on the iPad. And they just happened to be good plugins, and so I use those a lot. I do actually use the UAD stuff readily, mostly in my classes because I'm trying to teach people how to use the equipment, and we can't afford to buy like all the different pieces of equipment. So this way, it gives them something that's a little bit more educational to use. However, I will say this. The compressor plugins that you get on your DAW are fine. They work. And I would not ever upgrade unless I had already mastered that plugin or it wasn't giving me something that I knew I needed, right? Especially something like Logic. Logic has some of the best plugins now. I hate the way it works, but like plugin-wise, it's fantastic. And they like their compressor plugin has like versions. So like the red plugin is a Focusrite compressor, and the silver plugin is an LA2A, and the black plugin is 1176. Like they have different emulations. So I would always use the compressor that comes with your DAW and use that until it no longer does what you, or gives you what you need. All right? I have 1 minute for another question. Yes? Yes, I have used this. The question is, have I used the software Reason? Absolutely, yes. Well, they have compressors and stuff in Reason, so yeah, you could use that. Reason. Do you use it more for the MIDI aspects of it, or?
I use it for basically playing around with stuff that I don't want to buy analog.
Okay, well, yeah. Yeah, I mean, you can use that. It's fine. Works fine. All right. I've been told to wrap it up. So feel free to come up and ask any questions while I'm packing up. I'll also answer in there. Oh, real quick, before everybody leaves, please don't leave yet. Okay. If you want to get in touch with me, this is a great way to do it. Plus, there are 3 more panels. Acoustic treatment tomorrow at 3 o'clock in panels 2. All right? If y'all are interested in it, please come, because it's going to be, I think, streamed on Twitch, and all my students are going to be, like, watching it. And so I can then say, everybody say hello to everybody in Texas. And then we're doing Reaper in the orchestra panel tomorrow also, and then classical recording in orchestra also. Thank you so much.